All right, everyone, welcome to the Movie Changeup Podcast Disney Plus Weekly Review. I'm your main host, Joe Fricke, along with my, as always, co-host, Tristan Mayer. If you haven't watched our show before, and you probably haven't because this is only our second iteration of this, each week, usually Friday night, Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon sometime, we're going to break down this past week on Disney Plus, the shows that have come out, maybe any movies that have dropped. We especially started to do this because we have a big show in the Marvel universe, a big show in the Star Wars universe, coming out at the same time. So we figured instead of doing two separate reviews, let's just combine them together and do it all in one go. So that's what we decided to do. Tristan, what were your thoughts kind of on overall Disney Plus this week? You think it was a good week for Disney Plus?
It was a pretty good week. We got two big episodes of TV shows, and we also got a movie, which is kind of a new thing for Disney Plus to launch free movies rather than having to pay the $30. So it was nice to get a free movie for once, and I think we have another one coming up fairly soon. But yeah, it was a pretty solid week. I liked a lot. I liked one of the episodes a lot, and the other one I thought was pretty good. We'll get into it more as we go.
Yeah, I'm kind of in a similar boat. I think I thought both were really good, so it'll be interesting to talk about. You want to start with the first one I have on the list, which was the episode of Loki titled "The Variant," season 1, episode 2.
Yeah, it's good. I want to start with that one. So I took a good amount of notes for that. So I have a lot to go with you, Joe. We're gonna go scene by scene and kind of get some thoughts on this. But then
All
at the
right.
end, we definitely have a lot of kind of theories going around on the internet that I want to get your thoughts on.
Okay, yeah, I got some theories too, and some speculation, and kind of some ideas I've thought about for a long time. So since Wednesday, anyways.
Well, what were your thoughts on the episode generally?
Overall, I thought it was really good. I don't know if it was last week on this show or just in conversations with people. With Loki, I've never been a big Loki fan. I mean, I thought he was solid. I thought he was fine. There were a number of times I thought we were just kind of done with the character, so I wasn't really that interested in the show. I knew I would check it out, but I'm really liking it so far. I like it a lot more than I thought I would, that's for sure.
Yeah, I'm very impressed by it. I remember at first we were talking about, do we want to talk about Loki or not on this show? And I think both of us at this point agree that it's worth talking about, even if it's just for the fun of the episode, even comparatively to the theories. No, this franchise loves to have the fans that run out and have these crazy theories. You've seen that in previous shows, but this is one that I think encourages it and I think makes it kind of fun. And even if by the end nothing really turns out of it, this journey of it and like just kind of the fun of this first few episodes, I'm really having a good time with it. So yeah, I'm into it and I can't wait to see what comes next and if any of these theories come to fruition or not.
Yeah, that's where I'm at.
All right, so like you said, the second episode. Last week we got a cliffhanger where we found out that the variant they're chasing is obviously a variant of Loki, and we kind of get that cliffhanger ending, and we don't see who it is, but we're told essentially the variant is you. And now we open up on yet another attack from that variant. We're led to believe for a second or two that we're in the Renaissance times, but nope, we're actually in the 1980s
Yeah,
in
Oshkosh, Wisconsin.
Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Yeah, some Midwest representation up there. Shout out to Oshkosh. Get your MCU paychecks going through
Yeah.
that city of Oshkosh. But yeah, it's a Renaissance fair, and the TVA has kind of arrived here, and they get in this confrontation with who we now. Well, I want to call her Lady Loki for the course of the
Yeah.
episode, but you might
Yeah, I was
change
gonna
it
say
by the
our
end. Who
theory,
knows?
my theory, I mean, it wasn't like wholly my theory. A lot of people had this thought too. Was when the Loki variant showed up and they didn't reveal its face to be Tom Hiddleston. Like I was definitely on board for it being Lady Loki. So I'm
Yeah,
cool.
Joe called it last week on the podcast, and I'll give you credit for that one, Joe, for now, until we get to the end of the episode. I might have to take the points back if it turns out that you were wrong about that theory, but we'll see.
All right.
Anyway, we get back to this action scene. We have yet another appearance of Holding Out for Your Hero. I think it's the third appearance of that song this week in pop culture. It was in the Guardians of the Galaxy trailer last week, at E3 this week. It was also in the Masters of the Universe trailer, and now it's in Loki. So
Oh yeah.
unfortunate timing that I'm kind of burnt out on the song, but here we go. Action sequence. What'd you think of this scene here with the song montage setting up the episode here? Another attack from the variant Loki.
Yeah, I thought it was cool. I thought it was kind of interesting that that song played like during the villain attack. So I wonder if it's almost a foreshadowing of maybe we watch this season of the show and we go back and watch this episode and we realize maybe this quote unquote Lady Loki was the hero after all.
Yeah, I think at the very least they're gonna give her a sympathetic angle to come from this. Like maybe the TVA took out her timeline and she's here for revenge, or maybe uh, her her people were destroyed. The TVA is not letting her save them because that's an important Nexus event. They have to die. That's part of the course history or whatever. And I think they'll give her a sympathetic angle because, like Loki said in the episode, nobody who's good is truly good. Nobody who's bad is fully bad. Something like that. And I
Yeah.
think that's something the show's going for. Is sure Loki's the villain, but also he has a heart. And I think they wouldn't have a Loki sympathy show and then have the bad guy just be bad.
Yeah.
I think that kind of defeats the point of the show. So yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely think that foreshadows a turn to good or some kind of reveal of being good the whole time around from this Loki.
Yeah.
We didn't talk last week about the title sequence. So what do you think of the titles? Just kind of like the swapping between the fonts, very simple, quick
Yeah.
title sequence.
Yeah, I like it. I think it ties into the whole multiverse angle and different, different worlds and all that. So I like it.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool, especially like compared to WandaVision. I had those really long, elaborate title sequences. It's kind of like, oh, it's just like here's the title, almost
Yeah.
like the Bad Batch title sequence, where it's like, oh, here it is, a Bad Batch.
Yeah. It also reminds me of like those serial killer notes where they just like cut out pages from like magazines and whatnot to assemble a note so you can't decipher their handwriting. But I also think that kind of ties into the whole 1950s, 60s kind of aesthetic too. So
Yep. Speaking of magazines, Loki is now slacking off reading about jet skis in this jet ski ordering magazine from the 90s. He's supposed to be studying, but he's not really studying. And Miss Minutes shows up as sort of a hologram to confront him and say, Loki, why aren't you studying? Do you know your stuff? And Loki recites off that he does know his stuff, but then he starts harassing Miss Minutes, asking her, like, if he can hit her with the book. He's trying to hit her on the desk and mess with her. And they get this interesting line of saying, like, are you a recording or are you real? And she says, well, sort of both. And I think that's kind of interesting for the show, as so many things are one thing, kind of another. And if you think about it too hard, it doesn't make sense, but stop thinking about it so hard and it'll make sense.
yeah, pretty much.
I thought it was kind of cool to see Miss Minutes again. You mentioned last week that it was Tara Strong, and I was curious if it was just like a cameo for the one scene or whatever, or if she was going to be a character that comes back. And it looks like at least for one more scene we got Miss Minutes.
Yeah, I think she'll be kind of a recurring character. Maybe not in every episode, but I think she'll have a scene in most episodes moving forward.
So Mobius comes in and interrupts this kind of fight scene between Loki and Miss Minutes and says, oh, there's been an attack. We got to head out because it's the attack we saw at the beginning of the episode. There's been an attack by the other variant Loki, and now it's your chance to prove your loyalty, Loki. You're coming out with us. So we get this kind of cool. You mentioned last week like a cop show vibe for this show, where we get that here. Like the team's getting ready. They're all kind of gearing up, and the guys giving out the plan. And they even have like a little hologram of in a cop show, I'd imagine like, oh, here's the map, or like even a video game, it's oh, here's where you got to go from here to here. But it's like, oh, it could be any Loki, and they are showing like a couple of different like multiverse versions of Loki.
Yeah, someone
like half troll Loki.
Yeah, someone on TikTok showed there's the one where he has like the rain suit or whatever on, where apparently I guess they just took like a paparazzi photo of Tom Hiddleston and photoshopped a rain suit on him.
That's funny. But yeah, this is a funny scene. I like the comedy of this episode a lot, and I think you can tell like the writer of this show is also a writer on Rick and Morty, so I think he has these moments where you can let that like sci-fi comedy past kind of shine through. And here's one of those scenes. I especially like the troll Loki. That's like a half troll, half Loki.
Yeah, I really like it. I thought it was more like Hulk, but either way, I thought it was really kind of cool looking.
Yeah, I like the cop vibes of the scene. Like I said, they're kind of getting ready to go out on their mission and getting their goals. Yeah. And Loki has this kind of weird scene here where Mobius, I didn't write down the specifics, but Mobius mentions a power that Loki has, and Loki says, "Oh well, actually, it's this power," and kind of corrects him. And I wasn't sure. This is kind of a weird scene. I was like, is this just like an overwritten, not that funny scene, or is this like Loki trying to distract them, or something? Is there? I don't know.
I think it's more just showing Loki's personality and like showing that he always has to be right and always has to be the smartest person in the room. I think it's more. more what that scene was trying to convey.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It's just Loki trying to flex and be like, "Oh, I know more than everybody else, even more than the TVA," you know.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
people online are trying to say, "Oh, well, what about?" I'm sure that's going to be important, and I'm like, "Well, probably not."
yeah,
Some scenes are just jokes, you know.
yeah.
But then they kind of get this explanation of how, as soon as they show up in this Renaissance fair, we get sort of an explanation of how these time travel things work. Is that because this is a Nexus event or like a key event, it has to play out in real time. They can't just go back and change a specific moment or specific, because Loki asks them, "Why don't you just show up as soon as before the attack even happens?" And Mobius essentially says, "Oh, they got to play out in real time." So I
Which
think
I
that
think
kind of
was just their way of explaining for like the viewers of why they don't do that. They're like, okay, that's the one thing people are gonna say on social media and on Twitter and TikTok and Reddit and all that. It's like, why don't they just show up before the attack and kidnap Loki, but kidnap like Lady Loki or whoever it is? And it's like, well, because we can't. That's why.
yeah, I like a lot of this episode feels like that, and they even address it kind of directly later on. It's like a lot of this doesn't make sense if you think about it too hard, but especially like time travel gets so wonky and
Yeah,
complicated. But I do think like having it play out in real time is kind of the thing that comes back later in the episode, and I think it's interesting that they give it this one rule. It's like, okay, it has to be real time, and that's all you really get. And
yeah,
I wonder how much they're going to play with that now that we kind of get that little bit of a rule. But you also get a little hint here that the TVA might be a little bit more evil than we think, because Loki's been doing his homework, and they pop quiz trivia him on what do these disintegration bomb things do, and he explained it to him and says essentially that it kills and disintegrates anybody around them. So the TVA is essentially wiping out all of these innocent people right now.
yeah.
Like when they put this thing down and set it off, they're essentially killing this Renaissance fair full of civilians in the name of the sacred timeline. And I think that hints to a bit of a shadier darkness of the TVA that's been building up over these two episodes.
For sure. Yeah, they're not exactly on the up and up as they claim to be.
And I think that's something that'll definitely, like, I'm imagining WandaVision where it's like you're kind of ahead of it because you know Agatha's probably bad, you know, and then like people say, oh, well, there's got to be more to it. But maybe it's just the TVA is bad, you know, and I'm down for that too. I think that's kind of fun, like all this shady
Yeah.
corporate uh, overlords that turn out to be the bad guys. And then Loki and the Lady Loki that we thought were the bad guys got to work together. You know, that's a fun kind of
Yeah.
arc, and I like these little hints like that. That sure they're doing it for a good reason, but they're doing something bad. It also reminded me too of Captain America's line. I can't remember which Avengers it was, but he says we don't trade lives, and I feel like that kind of defines what the
Yeah.
MCU views as like heroic behavior. It's like the people
Yeah.
who can save everybody no matter like
Yeah.
what the cost to them as individual heroes is, you know, and the fact that the TVA is just casually disintegrating people, I think, shows that they're not quite
Yeah.
heroes in the
Yeah.
eyes of the MCU.
Yeah. I don't remember which movie it is either, but definitely. I think it might be Infinity War, but doesn't matter.
It was one of those Avengers ones, you know. I think I've seen those a couple times, but they arrive at the crime scene here, and Loki, I think, is way too in over his head at this point, and he just kind of starts talking. You know, he gives this monologue about how back in my day in Asgard we had this saying, and guys, by the end of the scene, you can tell that he's just trying to talk his way out of this situation, and he's dragging it out as long as he possibly can.
Yep.
And then he has his final ultimatum saying, "I gotta see the timekeepers before it's too late. They're in danger." And Mobius kind of looks him up and down for a second and says, "You're lying,"
Yeah.
and calls him out. So, what'd you think of this scene here, Joe?
Yeah, I really liked it. I really like Owen Wilson as Mobius. I was kind of like concerned at first. I mean, before the show started, once I kind of saw him in action in episode one, I realized it worked, but I just wasn't exactly sure how Owen Wilson as in like an MCU kind of show would be. I expected him more to be like the comedic relief character, which to a degree he is, but he's still relatively serious, and I like the character a lot so far.
Yeah, I like it a lot too. I think he's a fun kind of straight man to Loki's goofy character, and even though he has some kind of quirks and charm to him, he's not like the goofy kind of bubbly character I think of Owen Wilson. So I'm liking the performance, and I'm thinking he's a great counter to the performance you're getting from Tom Hiddleston too.
Yeah, for sure.
We get a good scene here with the Mobius where he meets with the judge after this mission that kind of went awry, where Loki was brought out to capture this other Loki, and then of course just tailed him along and gave him nothing. So he's being reprimanded a bit by this judge. You saw her from last week. I can't remember what her name is, Renfair or something. It's
It's
not
something,
Renfair. That's where we just were.
something like that. But in the comics, she is married to King the Conqueror, who a lot of people assume is going to be the next kind of Thanos of the MCU. So
Yeah, and we're getting some potential in this show too. People are thinking, oh, is Kane the Conqueror going to show up because she's in this? Maybe they're going to kind of retcon a bit and make Kane the Conqueror into being a timekeeper. So that's kind of a theory going around too.
uh, when we get to theories, I'll have my theories on the timekeepers.
And I like this scene as well. It's very cop show kind of vibe where the team kind of messed up, and now he has to go to his supervisor and kind of talk his way into a second chance, and she's saying, "Oh, we given you so many chances. How do you still believe in this Loki?" And he kind of makes a case for himself and begs the judge for his one last shot to prove that he can solve this case, and then he's given that one last shot. And there's a lot of I don't even know how to get into the scene because so much of this is just people spiraling. But he mentions like, oh, you see this other agent on the side, and he goes and puts his drink down, and there's a couple of different lines of from his drink. You know what I mean when you leave lines from your drink on a piece of glass, and she says, "Oh, don't put your glass there. There's multiple rings there already." And he says, "Oh, they were all from you." They're kind of hinting a little bit here that, in my mind, that there's more than one Mobius.
Yeah, maybe.
That maybe there's multiple agents that are all Mobiuses.
Yeah, that's
But
possible.
I'm starting to get onto that theory. I don't know how big that is on the internet yet, but that's my theory, is that we're either going to get the fact that when Mobius messes up enough, he gets erased himself and replaced by a second Mobius, and maybe this is now yet another Mobius, and we're going to have to realize towards the end that the Mobius we know is going to either have to rebel and survive for himself, or kind of surrender and give in to this kind of fate that he believes in.
Yeah,
But I'm
that kind of
leaning towards
goes
that
into
theory.
yeah, that kind of goes into a lot of like the philosophical conversations between Loki and Mobius. Is there might become a point where he has to go against where all of the other Mobiuses in the past, when they realize, if like your theory is true, all of the other Mobiuses in the past, when they realize they screw up, are like, "Yep, I screwed up. I guess I got to be disintegrated." And this one, after all of his philosophical conversations with Loki, is like, "Yeah, no, like I deserve to live, and just because I screwed up doesn't mean I have to die." And maybe he goes on the run, and then that could be Loki season 2 or something like that.
Yeah, I like that because I really like Mobius, and I want him to have a bit of an arc himself, and I wouldn't want him to just be like this one season off kind of character. Now that I've kind of really started to like him.
Or maybe they go like Harrison Wells, the Flash thing, where if we get a Loki season 2, we get another Mobius, still played by Owen Wilson, but this one just has a completely different personality.
Yeah, that could be it too. And Mobius talked, I think it was last episode or maybe this episode, about how you always have that role you play, but you want to break out of that role. And sure, Loki's been a villain the whole time, but maybe he wants to play a different part of that role, and maybe Mobius is literally supposed to be that role of the cop who questions the rules but always kind of gets by, and now he wants to break out of that role, and
Yeah.
if he does, of course he's going to get reset by the TVA. But I would like to see some fun from Mobius, and I was going to save that theory to the end, but as we get further into that conversation between him and Loki, I think it's something to keep in mind that maybe they both have the roles they're trying to break out of a bit here.
Yeah.
There's also a notable shot where Mobius, because whoever this other agent is also bringing her back trophies from other timelines, like whether it's snow globes or whether it's things in her office, little trinkets. And one of the things that he looks at is a pen that says Franklin Delano Roosevelt High School.
Yeah.
And I think it's strange that they brought our attention to that pen. My theory as watching it was that it was just like a joke that the TVA is keeping an eye on high school age Captain America Steve Rogers just to make sure nothing goes wrong, and maybe he has this little souvenir from what would have been the high school that Captain America went to. But of course, the internet has run wild with that as well, so I'll save that theory towards the end if you want.
Okay.
But yeah,
Yeah, I didn't even
huge
catch
spin-off
that,
theory
so
from that one.
I didn't even catch that. So
Yeah, I'll save that for the end. I don't want to get too wild into the bushes here, but essentially Mobius is able to talk his way into a second shot here, and Loki, I imagine, is on his last leg, and Mobius comes out here and kind of has a confrontation with Loki where he's saying, "Oh, I'm not annoyed, I'm not mad, I'm disappointed," kind of conversation,
Yeah.
and he's saying like, I expect better of you, and uh, they kind of both have this admission here where they're saying, "I'm kind of trying to manipulate you in my own way," and that this is when Mobius calls him shivering little boy, shivering in the cold, and kind of sends Loki and says that I still kind of see you as this lost child who doesn't have any fathers to look up to,
Yeah.
and I'm trying to help you, or maybe I just want to use you for my own gain. Who
Yeah.
knows?
Yeah, I definitely liked a lot of their philosophical conversations. I like that aspect a lot. I think, was this also part of their whole, when he was asking him about the jet ski?
Well, yeah, because it isn't this exact scene, but they do kind of move into that scene next. Yeah, so it's pretty much from here to that. Yeah, so he's asking him sort of about if he why he had that jet ski magazine, and Mobius has this line of saying like, oh, there was this perfect unison of form and function in the 90s that created the jet ski, and he's always wanted to ride one, but of
Yeah.
course because he's a TVA agent and he has to follow these strict guidelines and rules for his role, he can't. So
Which
he has
immediately
this
told me
dream.
season finale, you're going to have Loki and Mobius side by side riding jet skis going after, you know,
Oh, I think so for
Lady
sure.
Loki. Like, there's no way that doesn't happen. Or it ends with Mobius and Loki on the run from the TVA riding off in jet skis. Either way, Mobius will be riding a jet ski come season end. But
Mm-hmm.
one of the part of the conversation I really enjoyed too, and I was really like, is where Loki and Mobius were talking about their own creations, and Loki was kind of dismissing Mobius's whole existence, like, oh, you were created by the timekeepers to serve this function. You're basically not even like a person. He's essentially implying like, oh, you're just like almost like an artificial being or something. And then Mobius turned it on him and essentially was like, oh, well, how were you created? And Loki essentially was like, yeah, I was created by the frost giants and raised by Odin. And Loki and Mobius was like, yeah, your creation is just as like crazy sounding as mine is, and you're not any less real than me. So
Yeah, I think this is interesting too because it works for the character level, it works for the story level, and I also think it almost works on this meta narrative level of comic book characters and the ridiculousness of what we're watching, and the fact that, like, I'm sure we're about to be off the diving board into crazy after the end of the episode here, and I wonder if this is the writers priming us saying, like, if you think too hard about who we are, where we came from, it all sounds kind of ridiculous, is a line for me that I think embodies comic book stuff,
yeah,
especially the Marvel stuff, where it's
yeah,
like, if you think too hard about these characters, their origins are kind of nonsense and it all kind of doesn't make sense, but
yeah,
just
like
kind of go along for the ride, and
yeah,
it's
like
real because you believe it's real.
Tony Stark flies around in an Iron Man suit that any person actually flying around in that amount of G forces he pulls would turn into a puddle. Like, the Hulk
Mm-hmm.
has his powers from gamma rays, which if you were hit by an insane amount of gamma rays, you might get like a sunburn at worst.
Yeah, I think it's a fun meta narrative for
Yeah,
the fans
yeah,
too, and I like it a lot. Like you said, Tony Stark is not even practically real, and that was the first thing out of the gate for the MCU. And now we're at the point where there's gods interacting with these beings who exist beyond time and outside of reality, and they're creating multiple different realities by the end of the episode. And yeah, like they said, if you think too hard about it, it starts making sense. So stop thinking hard about it.
yeah, for sure.
And then we get a bit of what Mobius's sort of beliefs are about the timekeepers and what their goals are, because he says they want to meet in peace at the end of time, and the idea that the timekeepers are, while the agents and everybody else are keeping order of the timeline, the timekeepers are here setting up some kind of perfect future for them all to live at live it out in peace at, and it very much feels like culty kind of religious
Yeah,
allegory vibes, where it's like they're following these leaders who they swear know what they're doing, and with no evidence of them knowing what they're doing.
yeah. As soon as Mobius said that, I'm like, well, that's never gonna happen. Like, there's not gonna be an end of time where. I mean, I have my own theories about how real time works, but we're not gonna get into that.
Yeah, clearly, I think they're trying to give us as many hints as you possibly can that if TVA is at the very least, morally compromised and living in the gray area of morality. Uh, and I think the fact that they had this culty relationship with the timekeepers is something that'll come up. Of course, like who are the timekeepers is kind of the big
Yeah.
overall question that I think they want us
Which
to be
lays into
asking.
my theory.
We kind of went and skipped around a bit there to get to that scene, but I think it was worth it. But we got the scene here where Loki is, as punishment for messing up the assignment, he has to do a bunch of research and figure out where the Loki variant might be hiding. And he reads along, tries to go to the librarian and says, "Oh, I need files for the origin of the timekeepers." And she says, "Oh, classified." I need files for the end of time, and she says, "Oh, classified." He says, "Okay, the beginning of time then," and she says, "Classified." And all he can get is his own file.
Uh-huh.
So he's reading through his own file and reads about the destruction of Asgard and is momentarily moved before realizing that maybe the variant can be hiding out at these disasters where they can do pretty much anything they want without picking up on the timekeeper's
Yeah.
radar.
I will say that's my one slight problem with the show, and it's like one of the things we've talked about before. If you think about it too hard, it doesn't make sense. Like, I feel like that would be standard operating procedure for any variant on the run who has the ability to time travel, is like, because I feel like that's general common sense of like, oh, I'm gonna go where I can't affect anything because everything ends up the same anyways. So, like, like they like I understand it's part of the show and they have this whole theory they had to test out, but to me it was just like that should be thought number one of like where's any variant hiding out. I don't know, the number one places where anything they do doesn't matter.
Yeah, it feels like something the TVA should have definitely been aware of,
Yeah.
or at least testing at some point before
Yeah.
this. Like, why is Loki just showing up now and figuring this out?
Yeah.
Why weren't they at least trying this?
Like it wasn't anything I had thought of like before this like episode started because I wouldn't have ever needed to. But if you gave me like an hour to just sit and ponder where like potential variants were hiding, I'd be like, well, Pompeii would be probably a good place to start. New Orleans during like hours before Hurricane Katrina hit would be another start. Like the time of the
Yeah,
dinosaurs right before the meteor hit, other great start.
that would be a fun one.
That could be a future episode, just Loki running amongst the dinosaurs.
I could talk my way out of this and be like, oh, well, the TVA, that's the point. The TVA is all corporate. They don't know what they're doing and they become lax and lazy. But I think the reality is that if you think about it too hard, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And Loki found it because Loki's smart and Loki gets to find the answers, and now Loki and Mobius get to be the only two people in the whole TVA who know the truth,
Yep.
and that's kind of the cop show vibe of this anyway. All right, where was I at? We're heading right now. Loki has to sort of convince Mobius that his disaster scene is correct, and this is when we get the salad scene. Mobius is eating his depressing little salad,
Mhm.
and Loki uses it as a metaphor to show
Oh
him
yeah,
why you would hang out in the disaster zone. He's dropping
just
salt and
random
pepper,
foods. Yeah,
all
all up
kind
in
of
it.
stuff out of the salad. Grabs, I can't remember the character's name, but he was in last week's episode. He didn't know what a fish was.
Oh yeah, Charlie
And
or
he has
something like that.
a
Yeah.
little cameo in the background, which I thought was funny. And Loki grabs his drink and pours it into Mobius' salad for final effect, but gives him a disaster of a salad, showing him why you could hide out in a disaster zone and not be caught by the TVA. Mobius buys it, and the two secretly head out to Pompeii. What'd you think of the salad scene, Joe? It was
Yeah, it was
popular on
funny.
Twitter.
Yeah, it was just like a funny scene that was just like, oh, let me ruin this guy's salad. That's like a fun thing to do.
Yep. One of those scenes where I think any other actors would have made it bad, but Owen Wilson and Tom Hiddleston are charming enough and fun enough in these roles that I was having a good time with it. And
Yeah.
like I said, funny that there's a random cameo from the other dude.
Yeah.
I wonder if he'll be back again.
Yeah, I think he's gonna be kind of a recurring thing throughout this season of just popping up for funny moments and scenes. I don't think, unless they like build him up, and it's like a whole Darth Jar Jar thing where he's
He's
like
the timekeeper.
he's the timekeeper.
Anyway, we go from there to Pompeii, at famous disaster, of course, and this is where they're hiding out to test out their theory and see if they can do whatever they want at this disaster zone and not pick up any interference.
Yeah, that was another great funny scene where Owen Wilson's like, yeah, just don't really do a whole lot, and we'll just kind of monitor for variance levels. And Loki runs around like a kid in a candy store. He releases the goats. He's jumping up. He's basically telling all of the people in what I assume is Greek that, hey, or ancient Greek anyway, it's like, hey, y'all are gonna die, and that volcano's gonna erupt and kill all of you, and there's nothing you can do about it.
I thought that was really funny. A hilarious scene. I wrote down Owen Wilson's line, "Can you make bird noises?" Because he's just trying to like they'll do little bird chirp variations, and I thought
Uh,
that was really funny.
oh yeah, that was good. Like yeah, the whole like yeah, can you do bird noises? And Tom Hiddleston just like runs out there and goes crazy. One of the things I wonder with this show, because I mean it's all Disney anyways, especially like Disney Plus, is like for scenes like that, do they use the volume that they use on like Mandalorian and then they're gonna use on the other Star Wars shows? Because I know they had the one in Los Angeles, and I know they were gonna build one in London for some of the shows in London, and they're gonna build a few more. So I wonder if like some of those scenes use the volume.
They might have. That's a good point because that's a really cool. I love that volume thing. That's such a cool looking effect, and I didn't look as great at this Pompeii scene. I
Yeah.
almost looked like a Doctor Who scene or something, but yeah, I mean, I thought it looked not quite Mandalorian level, so I'm not sure if
Uh,
they use the volume or not.
yeah, I don't know. I just wondered overall for like this show and like any for like Falcon and Winter Soldier, it was more like real sets, I think, and it looked real city. So I don't think they did for that. But I'm curious for like moving forward if they're going to use it. I don't know why they wouldn't, but
Yeah, I hope so. I think it would only make sense for them to use it when they had that elaborate setup,
yeah,
right? And you'd think that these shows would only get bigger as they get into like
yeah,
Secret War type storylines. And then I love the line too of Loki's like, "We are from the future, right? It's not quite clear." He's like kind of confused in what's
mm,
even happening himself. You know, but I understand, Loki. I understand. And then it's after this scene where we get that scene we mentioned earlier, where they talk about the jet skis and the creation, their whole origin stories, and what that means to them.
yeah,
And this reminds Mobius when Loki brings up the sad little boy shivering in the cold, and it reminds Mobius of the little kid in the premiere episode that he gave the gum to,
oh yeah,
and he decides they're going to find the Loki variant by cross-referencing this very specific time frame in the future where this kablooey gum was available, and cross-references that with any disasters on their list that are big enough to warrant hiding at. And we get some tragic news that, of course, the climate's going to be destroyed in the next, like,
mm,
15 years or so.
yeah,
They're reading through these events like, oh, the
yeah.
climate disaster of 2030, and I'm like, oh, well,
Oh,
okay, we've
oh,
got
thanks
15
guys.
years left or something.
9.
Yeah, I don't know. It was somewhere around there, but yeah, of course, they find their one perfect match, and it's this hurricane in 2050 that's destroying this grocery store full of
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, that was
And
another moment where I'm like, okay, that gum was definitely sold in more than one grocery store, and a hurricane that massive is definitely going to affect more than one grocery store. So how did they narrow it down to one? Would have been
yeah,
interesting. I would have liked even if they were like, oh, there was like a small bit of like soil and on this gum, like the wrapper of
mm-hmm.
this gum, and we checked like just a line to like, oh, we narrowed it down to this one store. But just being like, oh yeah, there's a hurricane in Alabama. Let's go to this store. Right store. Way to go, boys. Figured it out.
Yeah, I imagine a longer series or like a
Yeah.
sitcom length show, we would have gotten like, oh, let's go to all these different places and see what we can find,
Yeah.
and like a. But yeah, I don't know, 6 episodes. Let's get to the meat of it, But like you said,
Yeah.
it would have been good to have at least a line there to why is this one. Maybe they did, but I don't think they did.
Yeah. If we had more people watching, someone would be screaming in the comments. They said in minute 27, second 17, the exact reason why they knew it was this store. But
Yeah, they'd be yelling at us and saying, "Oh, actually, guys, it's here in this comic issue. They mentioned it here."
yeah,
But I didn't catch it, so that's
yeah,
not the important part. The important part is that they're hunting down the variant here in this Rocksmart, which I think is from the Marvel comics. That's got
yeah.
mentioned
There's like
a lot of times throughout.
there's like evil corporation called Rock something or another that as part of the Marvel universe.
Because I was seeing online that it's gotten name dropped a handful of times in previous Marvel stuff. It's just like this backdrop of big corporation thing.
Yeah,
uh, and then we get the scene where the variant Loki is possessing different people and kind of passing it around to different bodies. And that's kind of happening simultaneously with Mobius and the TVA talking to these civilians, trying to figure out where the variant is. And I think I'll get that scene out of the way quick, where the TVA is not having much mercy on these people because they're just like, whatever, they're gonna die, they don't
Yeah.
matter. And Mobius is at least trying to have a little bit of empathy and saying,
Yeah.
these are human beings, they're scared, like give them
Yeah.
some peace even in their final moments. And I think that shows Mobius is a bit more of a carer than a TVA is, and I'm hoping that means he's gonna turn to the light by the end. I want my good guy
Yeah.
Mobius.
Yeah. Or he's the timekeeper, and it's all a front.
That too, he could be the timekeeper.
We'll get to my theory on the whole timekeeper situation at the end of our review for this episode.
And we finally get this building up scene where Loki is going to confront the variant Loki, and she's passing along her consciousness to various different people to build it up even longer of who is this Loki. But they're having this conversation where Loki's saying like, "Oh, my plan was to overthrow the timekeepers. I want you on my side. I was trying to buy you time at the beginning of the episode when you were in that medieval Ren fair."
Yeah.
And that's why I was taking so long. And then we get this reveal. She pulls down her hood, and it's seemingly Lady Loki, a blonde-haired woman with her half Loki horn on, vibing like Loki.
One other thing I wanted to bring up that was mentioned earlier during the whole confrontation, I think it was when he was the first guy that he pretended to be, the first guy Lady Loki pretended to be, where Loki confessed like he was undercover, and I wanted your thoughts on. Do you think that was a lie of him being undercover, and if not, like at what point do you think this whole undercover thing started? Like after the TVA captured him and he realized what the TVA was, or do you think it was from the very beginning, like when he first used the time stone? Did he already know what the TVA was? Because I believe in the comics his mom Frigga was part of it, so do you think he always knew what it was and he was like, I know this is where the true power is and I'm going to use the time stone to like erect this whole plan to run the TVA and use my power for that? Or just kind of what were your thoughts there?
Yeah, I did, but I didn't think it was that long scale of a plan. That would be interesting. But yeah, I kind of bought into what the show presented to us essentially in the beginning, where he's presented to the TVA and he's not quite sure what this is and he's figuring it out. And along the course of the first two episodes, he's started to have a plan of his own. But I don't think Loki's too far ahead of anybody else. I think Loki is pretty much just lying at this point and saying, "Oh yeah, I've been ahead of it the whole time. I knew it was happening." And really, maybe he's a couple steps ahead of Mobius, a couple steps ahead of the TVA, but he's not. He doesn't have some master grand plan. He's just talking his way through it and trying to sound big. Because I think Loki's definitely in over his head at that point.
Yeah.
I think he walks to that portal at the end and has no idea where he's going and no idea what's next, and had no real plan on taking out the timekeepers either.
No, I think his plan was more on just gonna move up each level, essentially get to the timekeepers and figure it out from there. But one of the things I expected almost like a bigger reveal when Lady Loki pulled off her hood. Like I kind of expected it to be a known actress, and maybe someone who knows more would be like, oh, she was on Doctor Who for like a couple seasons or something, or some show I don't watch. But I know I like said Keira Knightley last week for like a potential actress for Lady Loki, but I don't know. I just for whatever reason expected a bigger reveal to be Lady Loki, or just like the Loki in general.
Yeah, after 2 episodes at least, I thought, okay, they're at least going to give us some kind of reveal. I was wondering if it would even be like an actress we know of from the MCU. That would be kind of like Kate Blanchett or something, as all of a sudden Lady Loki. But that would have been confusing. But that would have been like a fun multiverse kind of twist, like, oh, I'm Loki in this universe kind of thing.
Yeah, that would have been.
Now
cool.
Is a good time as any though. Is this Lady Loki, Joe, or is this a different character?
I think it could be a mashup. Is kind of where I'm leaning, of like it might be one of those things where it has kind of the name of a different character, but it's still at the end of the day the powers, abilities, traits, and personality of Lady Loki is kind of where I'm.
Yeah, because people are starting to theorize it might be Enchantress, which is a different character from the Marvel Universe with similar powers, but a different origin story and a different kind of vibe to her character, because she doesn't quite look like Loki, and I think, like in the previous scene, they established that all the variants of Loki kind of at least look like Loki. They have the black hair. They have
Mm.
kind of Tom Hiddleston-esque aesthetics,
Yeah.
and I think if they were casting her as Lady Loki, they would at least have given her like a black wig or something and
Yeah,
dyed her
she would
hair.
have jet black hair and stuff like that.
So I wonder if they're leading us on a goose chase here. Lady Loki is going to be a red herring, and she's actually Enchantress, or even if that matters at all. I don't think they're going to pull that kind of a lore twist, like, oh, you thought it was this obscure character, it's actually this obscure character, But for the outside viewer, they can just say, oh, cool, it's a Lady Loki. I think maybe for the comic book audience, they're trying to get us to question a little bit of like, oh, is this or isn't this Lady Loki?
Yeah. And I think it could also be a mashup where, maybe she's from a different universe and she's like an enchantress that was raised by Odin, and so for all intents and purposes, she's kind of both.
Mm-hmm. And I'm confident we're gonna get enough from this character to know her origin story. Like I think they're
Yeah.
by episode 2, we've already seen her and seen her face and everything. So I have to imagine we'll get at least a flashback or something showing us her origin. So whether she's Enchantress, whether she's Lady Loki, I'm excited to see what's
Yeah.
the history of the character, the future of the character. I'm really interested to see how she interacts with Tom Hiddleston. I'm just looking forward to what the next step is for that.
Yeah. For sure.
And we get the reveal of her plan for the episode here was that she had captured all these time bomb things, and at one moment she sent them all through portals and blew up
Yeah.
these various points along the
Make-
sacred timeline and essentially
Made them all
reopened
go,
what seems like the multiverse. And now the TVA
Yeah.
is losing its mind.
and then she made them all go kablooey, as the gum
Yeah,
would say.
yeah, they went kablooey.
Uh,
You should have known when you hear the title of the gum. But
One of the
I'll
things that
s-
I
Go
wanted
ahead.
to bring up, I don't know if you noticed this or you saw this. So, if you know anything about Marvel comics, take place across the multiverse, and each universe within the multiverse is given like a different designation. Like the one where Deadpool kills the Marvel universe has its own number designation. All these other variants have these different designations, and the main Marvel universe, the main kind of comic line that all of them branch off of or like are derivations of, has the designation 616. Well, this episode premiered on June 16th, which would make it 616.
Oh wow, look at that.
So that's why a lot of people are theorizing they move the episode releases to Monday or Wednesdays so that would line up. And I think this show has done so well on Wednesdays that they are deciding to move all of their main shows to Wednesdays instead of Fridays.
I like that a lot, especially because I think we're obviously, whether they're gonna like pull it back on us or not, I think we are seeing the multiverse literally. Like that's exactly what opened up right there.
Yeah.
And Loki stepped through that portal. I imagine he stepped into some other multiverse, and next week we're gonna get some crazy Loki multiverse episodes.
Yeah. And another thing I've been seeing too, which I like, is these in a way can kind of make the Netflix shows canon. They can make the like freeform shows canon of like, okay, that's why the Netflix shows were able to reference the MCU that happened before, but the MCU never really referenced them, is because they're kind of their own branch of the multiverse. What's the show, freeform show, Lock and Key or something like that, or Cloak and Dagger? I don't know.
Cloak and Dagger.
Yeah, I don't know, something like that.
Saw that one.
As its own branch of the multiverse. Agent Carter, Agents of Shield, they're their own branches of the multiverse.
I think it's a great out for that. Like I'm really excited to see what Marvel does next. You can tell Marvel and DC are both kind of at a race for who can pull up the multiverse first, and I think Marvel is ahead of the game on this one, and it's going to be exciting to see what they do with it.
And one of the things I've always been curious about is because the X-Men have the X-Men's backstory is so much a part of the X-Men. Like you can't just be like, oh, Charles Xavier like got his mind reading powers at 40, and same with Magneto. Like, oh, he got his magnet controlling powers at like 60. Like it doesn't work that way. Like for those characters to work, they kind of have needed to have their powers for a while. And so having the branches like go back and start earlier, I think works, and that's another way to help make it more sense for the X-Men to be part of a different multiverse when it has been just one timeline for so long.
Yeah, this gives them so many ways to bring that in. Like you said, you can say, okay, because this one thing happened differently in like 1802 or whatever, one of those random dates in the list. You can say that one small butterfly effect.
Yeah, there was
one. The mutants.
You could say like, what's the Apocalypse? Like his gene mutated like 5,000 years ago, and making him the first mutant, and then that kind of started the whole X-Men thing.
Mm-hmm. And I'm not quite sure if they're diving all in on the multiverse. Like, is this officially the multiverse is in the MCU now, or is this okay? The multiverse is in Loki, but we gotta wait for Doctor Strange to really get
Now, I
ourselves.
think I think they're kind of banking on, because they've never. The thing is, they introduced the fact that there is one universe in Loki, right? Like that, they've been keeping everything from branching out, right, in Loki. So they could imply in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, like they never have to say, "Oh, there's only been the one multiverse," because technically, from outside the TVA's perspective, there could have always been more than one. There could have always been the multiverse, and now they're just interacting with each other. Like they don't necessarily have to know that there was a point where there was one timeline, if that makes sense. Because from Doctor Strange's perspective in 2023, there's been branches off of the universe since the dawn of time, if that makes any kind of sense. Because the
That
bomb
makes as
got
much
sent
sense.
back. Because the bomb got sent back to like 10,000 years ago. That
Yeah, and the
started a
TVA
branch.
exists outside of time, so
Yeah.
anything that happens here is pretty much always happened. You know.
Yeah, so Doctor Strange doesn't realize that, that those branches were technically created like a week ago, because to him, they were created 10,000 years ago.
I love it, Joe. I love this time travel wackiness.
And one
And
of the things, can I bring up another thing I've seen criticism
yeah,
for, is so in Infinity War, when like Doctor Strange is like looking through all of the potential futures, he's like, "Oh, I looked through like 14,000 potential futures, and there's only one where we win." And people are like, "Oh, how is that possible if the timekeepers make sure that there's only one timeline?" And the thing of it is they make sure that there is only one that ever happens. Like there are always potential for possibilities of different timelines, but the TVA's job is to make sure there's one. So Doctor Strange can always see different possible futures. It's the TVA's job to make sure that the only true, from their perspective, the only true correct one happens.
yeah, I think that people are really overthinking the TVA and thinking maybe they have more power than they do. And
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of either by the end of this series or by the end of the season, however they do Loki, the TVA is done. And if the TVA
Yeah.
collapses, that means it never was a TVA almost essentially. So
Yeah. Yeah.
when Doctor
Exactly.
Strange is seeing all those possibilities, it could be legit. Like if there's no TVA by the end of the show, then there was no TVA in Infinity War, and that's all real.
Exactly. Can I?
I don't
Are
know.
we to theories yet, or is there much
I was
more of the
about to
episode?
say if we want to get because we finished the episode, and if you want to just give some final quick thoughts, we could get into our predictions here because I have a little bit to go on.
Yeah, like I said, I'm really enjoying the show. I like it a lot, but I want to give my prediction and my theory for the timekeepers, or as I will say, the timekeeper, is I think it's so. One of the things I've been saying is the TVA exists beyond time, but we also know things inside the quantum realm exist outside of time as well, according to the Ant-Man movies. So my thinking in Kang the Conqueror is like the ruler of this city that's part of the microverse, or like this, it's the shrunken down city, like basically inside like the quantum realm essentially. And so my thinking is the timekeepers aren't real, they don't exist. Kang the Conqueror is actually the head of the one above the TVA, but he's created such like this myth and this legend. And if you look at the timekeepers in like the MCU, they kind of have a similar look to what Kang the Conqueror does in the comics. So I think he's created this myth, this legend of these like mythical beings that rule the time, like rule time. And I think it's more just Kang the Conqueror creating a timeline that's, you know, to his own image and what he wants. And I think when the TVA disappears, he's going to be like the new Thanos, and essentially the Avengers and everybody's going to have to work against Kang the Conqueror, who is trying to eliminate the multiverse.
I love it, Joe. I think that's a great direction. I I mean, we've done this before, where WandaVision comes up, and I started saying, "Oh, maybe it's Mephisto, maybe it's this," but I never felt confident they were going to do that. I thought, "Oh, that it could happen." Like there's these teases there that maybe it could happen, but for some reason, I feel more confident that I think Marvel's pushing this Loki show is an important thing. I think the fact that it's written by a guy who's also going to write or has written Doctor Strange 2 at this point.
And then I don't know if it's the writer of this show or the showrunner of this show is also writing Kevin Feige's Star Wars movie.
Yeah, so clearly this is not just like someone they picked that like a career writer type person. This is someone who is at least involved within Kevin Feige's plans
Yeah.
for what's going on, and I think he has these little nuggets here, and whether Kane the Conqueror literally shows up at the end and like reveals himself as a villain, or whether it's like a post credit scene, he turns around as Kane the Conqueror is like the last shot of the first season Loki in the post credit scene, and that's set up. Or I think you're probably right. I think that's the direction I think they're gonna go is Kane the Conqueror. I definitely think the timekeepers don't exist, either are dead or never existed or something like that, and the TVA is essentially just uh, this corporate monologue keeping itself alive, like without anything at its head. It's like this dying serpent body,
Yeah.
and there are no timekeepers. It's all based on a lie that they've been told. You essentially get that culty lie of like, oh, the timekeepers are too busy to talk to you right now, and they're too busy to deal with your problems, but also they're paying attention to every single move you make, and you better not make one mistake because they can see you and they're gonna know. And
Yeah.
I think they're setting up all these hints that the timekeepers are not real, and I think Kane the Conqueror, if you're gonna go with a villain that we know is coming, that's probably the best direction to go, because we know he's coming, and because people are starting to think maybe he's going to be one of the big build-up kind of Thanos villains, like you said.
Yeah, that's definitely what I'm feeling is more King the Conqueror. And we know, I'm pretty sure Jonathan Majors, who was in The Five Bloods, he was in Lovecraft Countries, trying to get into in Creed 3 if he hasn't been cast already, is going to be King the Conqueror in Ant-Man 3. So
Yeah, and since he's confirmed is what I'm thinking, because when you pull out Mephisto, it's like, okay, Mephisto is not even rumored to be in anything else. Why are you pulling out Mephisto? But this is someone that is going to
yeah,
be in a future role.
yeah, I
So
could
I'm
see.
feeling confident.
Yeah, I could definitely see King the Conqueror being like a post-credit scene.
That's exactly what I'm thinking. I'm feeling post credit on it. I'm feeling we build up the timekeepers to get a reveal that the timekeepers aren't actually real, aren't quite what they seem at all, and it's all just kind of a charade. And then our post credit scene is, in fact, Kane the Conqueror is behind it all, or maybe our Lady Loki is going to be interacting with Kane the Conqueror towards the end, like a Thanos type situation in Guardians of the Galaxy. I don't know. And I also want to ask, so when Loki jumps through this portal, where is he going?
I don't know. It could be one of a million places. It could be like Land of the Dinosaurs. Like I thought, it could be. It could be anything. Maybe he goes and talks to Chris Hemsworth, or not Chris Evans, in his own little weird universe that he created by going back to be with Peggy Carter. Which brings the question: why wasn't he considered a time variant when he went to talk to Peggy Carter? Did his all by the time he delivered the stones got back? Did he go back to be with Peggy Carter after the TVA was already destroyed?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think he's definitely jumping into some kind of multiverse. If I was gonna guess, like we might see, maybe he'll be in some alternate Asgard or something like that. Some kind of different spin-off of this universe. I think the fact that they split the timeline like that in so many ways, and now he's jumping into a portal. I think that tells me we're getting our
Yeah.
first appearance of the multiverse in the MCU next week.
What if he just walks into the portal and bumps right into emo Tobey Maguire Spider-Man?
That would be amazing. You get Andrew Garfield, Tobey Maguire in here, not in
Yeah.
Spider-Man 3.
Yeah.
They're like, sorry, we couldn't get a scheduling conflict with Loki.
I was just trying to think if Tom Hiddleston had, like, it sucks that like Tom Hiddleston hadn't been in like any like Marvel superhero stuff before this. Like if he had been in like Fantastic Four, you know.
I doubt it.
Well, no, because I was just thinking, because I don't think he has. But if he had, you could have him like go to that universe, and then people think he's somebody else.
That would be fun.
Like if he was
Because
Doctor Doom in like the 2005 Fantastic Four or Fant Four Stick or whatever, and people saw him, he jumped to that universe, and people were like, "Oh my God, are you like Doctor Doom or whatever?" It'd be kind of funny,
yeah,
but
I think it's going to be exciting because it opens up an infinite world of possibilities. I'm curious what Marvel will do with that amount of open-endedness, and Yeah, the writer here that, like I said, he's worked on Rick and Morty, which I think is kind of a creative show when it wants to be, and I think that shows potential for him to get really wacky and weird with it. Like if he wants to give us that universe where there's a troll Loki, maybe we'll see that. Maybe we'll
Yeah.
see like a Thor frog universe. That in other words, like a frog Thor character in the comics that was like
Oh yeah,
a
yeah.
we could see weird stuff like that. They go Spider-Verse with it. I'm really looking forward to what they do with it, and not just in Loki, of course, but in the rest of the Marvel universe. I imagine you get an end to it in Loki, and then maybe Doctor Strange kind of opens it up again into the Marvel universe. But I'm not sure. It's exciting though. It's more so than WandaVision or even Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I feel like this is our step forward into like what's next for the MCU. It feels like a beginning of the
Yeah.
new phase of Marvel universe.
Yeah, for sure.
I mentioned earlier that there's a bit of a theory going around about that pen, and my initial reading of it was, oh, that's a funny joke about Captain America in high school. But as we know from previous shows like Marvel, I mean like WandaVision, people are willing to run with anything and find some kind of crazy obscure comic book character that actually it's this, and people are saying that this pen is a reference to Molecule Man,
What?
and that in fact Molecule Man is going to make his MCU appearance based on the
Who the
fact that
fuck is Molecule Man?
look, Molecule Man is an alternate universe character. He was some kind of alternate like rich member of like the Reed Richards
Ah,
family, and we know that the judge in this universe, I can't remember her name, Reinhardt or something like that, who you
yeah.
said was a love interest of Kane the Conqueror in the comics. There's also alternate canon timelines where she was a Reed Richards love interest. So there's kind of like a connection between them. And Molecule Man, I guess, he grew up in Brooklyn and he had a defining experience in high school. And people are saying, oh, look, they're referencing to the fact that TVA went back and made sure Molecule Man became Molecule Man.
Yeah. Her
I
name is
look,
her name is Ravana Renslayer.
Renslayer. I knew there was an R in there somewhere.
So, here's my theory, based on nothing. One of the set designers, production designers for the show, went to Franklin Roosevelt High School, and that just happens to also be a high school in comics. And there you go.
Yeah, I think Molecule Man is a bit of a reach. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, who knows? We're going into a multiverse thing. They could have a random cameo of Molecule Man, or it could be like the writer of the show likes Molecule Man, so he put this random reference in that not important to the plot, but just a cool thing that people might get if you
Yeah.
know the comics. But I'm running with my theory still. I think it's a reference to the fact that the TVA keeps track of Captain America and went and kept track and made sure his high school experience was with it. Protected him somewhere along his timeline to make sure he became Captain America.
Yeah, maybe Hydra found out time travel and tried to go back to kill Captain America while he was still a weak little kid, and the TVA had to step in and stop that. But yeah,
And then I want to mention too, I had this prediction that there might be multiple Mobiuses in some form or another. Uh, I'm not quite sure how that's going to play out, but I'm running with that theory for a little bit. Whether or not it's Mobius, if he makes too many mistakes, he gets erased and replaced by another Mobius, and now we're seeing one of many Mobiuses along the line of Mobiuses in
what if
this show.
what if each Mobius is a different like early 2000s comedic actor? Like, what if this Mobius dies and the next Mobius is like Ben Stiller, and then the one after that
That would
is
be
Vince
funny.
Vaughn, and then maybe Will Ferrell is the fourth Mobius.
You never know. We could go to a multiverse where there's an alternate version of Mobius who's played by Ben Stiller. That would be a fun cameo.
Yeah, we get some Luke Wilson action in there.
Yeah, we had in Thor Ragnarok, we had the other Hemsworth brother
Oh,
show
yeah.
up and playing Thor for a
Luke
scene, wasn't
Hemsworth.
it?
Yeah, Luke
Yeah.
Hemsworth. Yeah, we had Luke Hemsworth, the brother everyone forgets about. Now it's time for Luke Wilson, the other brother that everyone forgets about.
For once, I feel like I really don't know what comes next on the show. I think with WandaVision, it was sort of easy by this point to know what was going to be next. Like it's going to be a weird second episode that slowly pulls a layer off of the layer of what is going on. But this, I feel excited because I don't know what's coming
Yeah.
next. You know, Falcon and the Winter Soldier was just it had plot twists and
Yeah.
stuff, but it wasn't like giving me mystery, keeping me strung along, thinking about it. And this has a lot going on,
Yeah.
and I can't. That portal can go anywhere. We could get anything next week. We could not even see the TVA again. We could just
Yeah.
follow Loki through a multiverse of madness.
Yeah.
You know, I have no clue what's next.
The show's not called TVA. The show's called Loki. So Loki could be like, ah, fuck the TVA. I'm done with them, and then we never see him again, and that's it. Bye bye Morbius. Morbius gone.
Yeah, I'm excited. We've talked for a while about it, but yeah, I'm really looking
Yeah.
forward to what's next. We've had some theories going around, but it's exciting to just
Yeah.
because I don't read into the theories too much. I'll just get like a vibe of what people are theorizing, you know, and be like, okay, I'll go with that and see what's going on. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Similarly to WandaVision, whether or not it pays off or not, cool journey.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. You ready to move on to the Bad Batch? We've talked about Loki for an hour.
Yeah, Bad Batch will not be an hour, I promise.
Yeah, but I think Bad Batch will be somewhat shorter review. Overall thoughts. I'll start. I thought the show was fine. I think it's probably my second favorite episode of the season so far. I think the premiere is still my favorite, but it's hard to compare 70 minutes to 25 minutes. I think my main problem with the show overall is it seems every week they run to a character we've seen before, and for the most part of me feels like they don't trust like the Bad Batch themselves and Omega to be like powerful enough leads, or have people care about them enough to come back every week. But I think they are, so I don't think they necessarily need to rely on bringing old characters back all the time. I think they don't necessarily need that, and that's kind of my overall thoughts on Bad Batch this week.
Yeah, I'm of a similar vibe as you. I had a good time with it. I think it had some really good action. I thought I had a fun tribute to Republic Commandos. We had a nice, cool like first-person visor sequence that I thought was fun, and it was fun to see Crosshair back. It was fun to see a big kind of climactic battle, and the Kaminoans back. This felt like a big episode. It felt like a mid-season finale, which it technically is a mid-season finale, but we're not taking any time off. But it felt climactic. But I am in a similar boat to you. The final moment of the episode is appearance from another character, and I think that's fun. But we've gotten it every episode this season, and I think if you remove a couple of the ones in the middle of the season, like we didn't need to have the one last week. We didn't need to have Rex last week necessarily. We didn't need.
I think if I had to cut any of them, it's Trace and Rafa, not because of my thoughts on them, because I'm not nearly. Because like there's people that outright dislike them, and I don't dislike them, but I feel like I don't see them coming back. I think they were more a gateway to Rex. Mm-hmm. And I think it could have been implied that Rex is working for these two new people that didn't necessarily need to be Trace and Rafa. They could have been anybody, and then turns out, oh, they were working for Rex. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, this would have paced it a little bit different. Maybe like maybe you get Trace and Rafa, then we get a couple weeks off. Now we get Cad Bane, and maybe next season we get the appearance of Rex. But yeah, a lot of cameo characters, and that I think. For animated Star Wars, get it a bit more of slack because I feel like they kind of it's part of the territory. I bet you're watching a show primarily aimed at kids, and they're gonna have those connective characters to keep the kids watching. But I wish they had the confidence in their characters because I really like the Bad Batch and all the personalities are very defined, and I don't need all these characters showing up, connecting things, and carrying the weight on their shoulders rather than giving the Bad Batch some weight to carry themselves.
Yeah, one of the things there were some moments I liked and some moments that I thought were interesting. One of the things was when Wrecker was teaching Omega how to disarm that bomb, and it exploded, and then it turns out it was just a smoke bomb, which really didn't put anyone in any danger. And Wrecker's like, it's okay, I failed my first bomb disarmament too. I kind of wonder if that's what made his face all fucked up. It's his first ever attempt at disarming a bomb.
Yeah, maybe. I think I'm really liking the relationship between Wrecker and Omega. I think that's the one they focus on the most, which is kind of surprising because Hunter and Omega were the focus of the premiere, sort of. And I think Wrecker has become a really interesting, fun character that I'm not usually the fan of those kind of like, oh, here's the big, bombastic, jokey kind of guy, but he's really fun on the show, and especially with Omega, I think they have a good foil to each other.
Yeah, for sure.
And I also wondered during that smoke bomb scene if maybe Omega's not force sensitive. I think part of the force is you don't like those kind of mistakes. Maybe if she was force sensitive, they would have given her that scene where she holds it for a second and then closes her eyes and then cuts the right chord.
Yeah.
That would have
Yeah.
been the language of the Force.
Yeah, I'm
Seems.
definitely leaning more towards that she is that they found a way to find all of their like all of their accidental flaws, and she is all of the Bad Batch combined.
Because I think they call her a contingency plan in the episode. The Kaminoans call her their contingency plan. So I wonder if she's some kind of like storage vessel for the
Yeah,
cloning DNA or something like
yeah,
that. Because that was my initial theory was that she was some kind of carrier of Palpatine's DNA,
yeah,
like whether she was a clone or not. But them calling her the contingency plan and making her specifically a vital part of their survival, I think, is interesting. And I think that shows that she's more than just a clone. She's even more than just a modified clone because she's the most important one. And I'm
yeah,
just really curious what that could be that makes her different than the Bad Batch and what
yeah.
makes her different than anything else.
Yeah, and I don't think we're gonna be doing much of scene by scene for this episode as we did for Loki, because I think we're more just jumping around. But one of the things with I think we're going to explore a lot more about her backstory potentially in the next episode or the episodes following, depending on how long she's actually kidnapped for. Like, is she going to be kidnapped for the rest of the season and then they rescue her in the season finale, or is she just going to be rescued next episode and that's it? But I think uh, I'm leaning more towards probably she's going to be away from the Bad Batch for like 3 or 4 episodes.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be long.
And I think we'll learn more about her story and backstory in that time. Like we learned, I think last week that she supposedly doesn't have an inhibitor chip. Whether that's actually true or not, we'll probably find out. I'm leaning towards she might have been told that, but it's not necessarily accurate. Um, and
Yeah, I think that is probably the direction to go. I don't think we're gonna wait too long for the answers because I think we've noticed like when the show has us asking questions, they answer them pretty quickly. Like who is the guy in the call with? Is it Bail Organa? Is it who is it? And then of course next episode we know who it is.
yeah.
So I think you're on the money that we're not gonna wait too long. But you have more to say on that?
Not really. I think I have a theory that we're gonna get Boba Fett sooner rather than later. Because if you know a lot about the behind the scenes, especially of the original kind of end of the Clone Wars show, there was an unfinished arc where Cad Bane and Boba Fett faced off one last time, and a lot of the extermination of all of the clones has appeared recently, especially in this last episode where the Empire is trying to take out all of the clones. And I think Boba Fett being one of them, I could see a situation where he is being targeted by the Empire, and he kind of has to go on the run and defend himself a little bit. And we've seen in the comics recently, Boba Fett, he doesn't do jobs that deal with kids. Like he doesn't, kidnap kids. He doesn't target kids. Any jobs that deal with kids, he doesn't take. And also the main plot of the canceled arc where Boba Fett and Cad Bane went against each other, that big longtime fans have been dying to see, dealt with the situation of a kidnapped kid. So I think there's a potential where maybe, I have said maybe they've been situations where they've run into known characters for too many episodes, but I would not be surprised if the Bad Batch run into Boba Fett next episode and they tell him what happened of like, hey, we're clones. I know you don't like clones, the regular, you don't like these reg clones. We don't like them either. Also, Cad Bane, your mortal enemy, kidnapped basically not just our little sister, but our little sister, because you're a clone too. So I think Boba Fett's going to team up with a Bad Batch to rescue Omega, and that's my prediction.
That's a cool prediction. Down the rabbit hole of characters showing up, I guess. But that's fine. And I think that almost is the cost of these shorter seasons. Like when the Clone Wars seasons were so long, you had enough room to fill in those episodes where it's just the team going on the run doing stuff. And if this season was a bit longer, I'm sure we would have gotten a handful more episodes of just the Bad Batch doing Bad Batch stuff, And when you have essentially just the highlight episodes and a handful of episodes in the middle to build those up, you got to have a lot of connective characters, I guess, at least in the first season.
Well, will you feel less this way, I guess, if kind of they bring in Boba Fett and that's kind of it for old characters coming back? It's more just recycling the ones they've seen. It's like, okay, they like run into Fennec Shand again, and Fennec Shand helps them. They run into Rex again, and Rex helps them. Like,
Yeah, giving the show a bit more of a leeway because it's the first season, and essentially, like any character that shows up from the previous shows is a returning character. But even they could just be like the first appearance, essentially like it. I don't know. These animated shows almost feel like one continuous show. So when they bring characters back from like Clone Wars, I think, all right, that's cool. And like you said, if they're more so building up a cast list rather than just having cameos, I think that's fine. Like Cad Bane could become like a semi-reoccurring character depending on how long this Boba Fett thing builds up. But Boba Fett could show up and become like a semi-reoccurring character, and
yeah,
now we've built up that cast, and that's all we got.
And the Bad Batch could almost. I'm gonna lead toward it's not. I think we're gonna mostly run with these characters, but we've essentially seen, what's his face, Echo become a part of the Bad Batch when he wasn't initially. Like he was not part of these like messed up clones that came together to form the Bad Batch. And do you think there could be the Bad Batch could almost be like the title of this group, and this group kind of changes out members and even include non-clones? Like, do you think we could be sitting at season like 4 and the Bad Batch is like, well, you okay over there?
Yeah, something fell off,
Yeah, but do you think there could be a point where we're at season 4 and the Bad Batch it's like Boba Fett, Hunter, some random character we've never seen before that we haven't been introduced to yet, and like Omega, and that's the Bad Batch?
I like that. Even if they're not part of like the actual core team of the Bad Batch, I get to them being part of like the group. They're one of their reoccurring friends. That's how I ship with them a lot. And the Bad Batch isn't just bad clones. It's like these outcast society. You come together and have this one group that can be a part of.
Yeah.
And I think that could be cool. Yeah, whether or not Boba Fett becomes part of that group or not, I don't know, because I don't know what his arc of character is necessarily going to be at this point in the show, because he's still a bad guy by the time we get to Empire Strikes Back. He doesn't really have his heroic turn until after the original trilogy does.
Yeah. My thing is like, does he have his heroic? Because I mean, to me, especially if we see him here, where he's like, yeah, I don't do jobs with kids. I don't respect bounty hunters that do jobs with kids. Like, to me, that doesn't change anything from his character in Empire Strikes Back. He's just doing a job. Like, I could potentially even see like the Bad Batch as we see them now do the job of go getting Han Solo for Jabba the Hutt, and that to me
that
really doesn't change anything. All basically because he doesn't even freeze. I mean, you could maybe include like because at the end of the day he's just capturing a guy that owes somebody money. Like, it's not really like, I don't see Boba Fett as like an evil character. He's just a guy doing a job. Is his job the nicest thing you can do? Not really, but it's not exactly like Han Solo was, Captain America either. So
that's true, because I think they can give the Bad Batch some moral greatness. They already have. They're working with someone like Sid, someone like Jabba, so they're giving them that bit. But even in this episode here, like, they do have a moral line where they're thinking about how they're broke, and they're thinking about how they have to sort of pay back Sid all this debt, and they're debating on selling what they have. And I think there's still a moral center to the Bad Batch, and it would be fun to see them interact with Boba Fett, though. But I just don't see Boba Fett become like a recurring member of the Bad Batch team. I think he'd be kind of like a Wolverine type person, where he's like, "Oh, I'm not. I work alone. I don't necessarily work with the team." Or Batman more so, I guess, like Batman being like this outsider who doesn't really work with the Justice League, just kind of there to be part of the member of the when they need him, but he's not part of the team, and that could be something that I could see them doing.
Yeah, I could see that, of just like he pops in and out, but we also need our Hondo appearance. It's not a Star Wars animated show without Hondo. Granted,
That's true.
I don't think Hondo was in Resistance, but whatever. Maybe he was.
Resistance doesn't count. That means Resistance is not canon, essentially. Yeah. I don't have to watch it anymore.
As someone who's seen it, you don't. It's if you're 7, it's great. But it's like where Clone Wars and even Rebels was like, hey, we target towards like 12 and 13-year-olds, but if you're 30, you can still enjoy it. Where Resistance is like, hey, if you're 7, you're really going to enjoy this. If you're not 7, well, good luck, I guess.
I thought the action in this episode was really good.
Yeah.
We've been waiting for the Crosshair return, and I feel like it definitely paid off. I think he's a threatening bad guy, and of course, this episode kind of confirms he's going to turn good eventually at some point. They've reminded us again and again that he has an inhibitor chip, but it's not his fault what he's doing. But while he's doing it, he looks pretty cool. You know, leading these Death Troopers, he's kind of has this vendetta against the Bad Batch. I feel like, and in his mind, he has to prove to them that he really is who he says he is, and he's not the good guy. He's not like still a member of the team, and I think he has this vengeance inside him where he wants to prove himself by taking down the Bad Batch and showing like, oh look, I really have changed. I really am Crosshair,
Yeah.
the bad guy.
And one of the things I thought was interesting is there was a moment where he had them cornered, or he had them like, in their sights, and Omega was the one that was like, it's not you, Crosshair, it's like the inhibitor chip. I told you about the inhibitor chip, blah blah blah. And then Crosshair turns and he tells his guys like, aim for the kid. I almost wonder if like his own sick twisted way, that was like his moment of compassion towards his friends, of like he didn't want to see his friends die. Granted, like, I'm not saying, oh, killing Omega is like this great, nice, right choice, but he doesn't have this connection to Omega. So I wonder if that was partially like the real Crosshair coming out of trying to defend his friends, even if that meant, Omega doesn't do so hot.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a good theory. I definitely think Crosshair turns good. We've mentioned it before,
Yeah.
but for sure, you mentioned they've said it to his face at this point, so I think he definitely has to turn good by the end of this show.
Yeah, well, how do you feel about the injuries he took, though? Because that was one of the moments, like, normally, because he kind of got, messed up. He got burned by that engine. Like, he had, like, the mask and stuff on, and it was almost, like, slowly turning into Vader. And so I'm kind of curious, is he maybe going to turn good, but it's going to be kind of his last thing, similar to Vader, where Vader turned good, and then that was kind of the end for Anakin Skywalker? Is there a time where Crosshair turns good, and whatever he does as the real Crosshair again is the last thing he ever does? Maybe sacrifices
Yeah, I think that's
himself.
possible. I think that could be more interesting than just he becomes good and joins the team again. I don't think he's just going to become good and join the team again. I think giving him like a sacrificial moment where he has a moment to decide, and he decides to turn against the Empire in his last dying moments, or something like that, could be probably the direction they go to. I think it would be fascinating and complex and heartbreaking if he did become fully bad and like him burning his face and he becomes like this iconic bad guy for the series. But I don't think that's the direction they go. He's clearly set up for at least semi-redemption.
Yes, because we've been talking for a while. If they bring Wrecker back, then someone has to die or go away, because that's been, it's just too many people on the team. And I think if Crosshair comes, returns to being good again, the person that dies could easily also just be Crosshair.
Yeah.
Which is something we haven't really thought about until I saw the mask on and him burned, and I'm like, oh, he's looking a little Vader-esque right there. So.
Yeah, because I don't think Crosshair is going to be the bad guy for throughout the entire series. I feel like he's maybe a season 1 bad guy, and then we'll get to somebody a bit bigger than him next season, bigger than next season.
Yeah.
And I also I mentioned earlier this cool scene where we get the visor shot, and I think it was definitely a reference to Republic Commandos, or at least to video games in general, where it's like a first-person kind of clone battle shot. It was very cool.
Yeah, I know, like, people are kind of over the whole Battlefront games, but I think a Bad Batch game would be kind of cool too.
Yeah, I think
like if you're just go through the Clone Wars and you can be any of the main or any of the main 5, you could set it in that time period where both Echo and Crosshair were part of the Bad Batch, and so you could be any of the 5 going, like, before each mission you could pick which one you want to play as, or you could play through the whole game as one of the 5, and I think it'd be kind of cool. You could play multiplayer. You could have, like you and I could be playing. I could be Hunter. You could be Wrecker. Like,
yeah, let's make it happen. We got to call up EA, right?
Yeah.
I think EA. Well,
EA has.
I think Star Wars is giving it out to other people now because there's a few other companies working on it. But
yeah,
I would love to see.
They're like, EA, you've been cranking out like one game every 2 years, so that's pretty fucking weak.
Give us something good.
And I'm not even. And Battlefront and Battlefront 2 are hardly 2 different games because they couldn't finish Battlefront in time, so they just released what they had, and then when they finally finished it, they released it as Battlefront 2.
I'm looking forward to the future of Star Wars games. Yeah. Between Fallen Order was really good, step back in the right direction. We had some Fallen Order connective tissue this week. We are once again on the same planet.
Yeah.
And I thought for a second, since we were back there, maybe there'll be a Cal Kestis
Yeah,
appearance or
so one of
something.
the someone behind the scenes, I can't remember if it was Kevin Kiner who does the music or one of the writers or somebody, posted on Twitter that there was going to be like a cameo in this episode of the Bad Batch, and I for sure thought it was going to be Cal Kestis or one of the characters in kind of the opening of that of Fallen Order on Braca, like that his friend that dies that kind of kicks off the story.
Yeah,
But
but
no,
alas, it
Cad
was
Bane.
Cad Bane. What'd you
Cad.
think of the Cad Bane appearance towards the
I
end?
mean, I love Cad Bane. He's not like my top 10 favorite Star Wars character, but it's always fun when he shows up. And I definitely, as soon as I saw Cad Bane, I'm like, oh, they're going to put that Cad Bane versus Boba Fett arc into the Bad Batch instead of the Clone Wars.
Yeah, I think for sure.
Fans have been
We sh-
asking for that for so long. There's no way they don't do that.
yeah,
I
and
thought for
even
a second they were gonna retroactively do that, but have it be Hunter instead of Boba Fett, and I'm like, ooh, that's gonna piss a lot of people off.
and even in the last season of Clone Wars, you saw like they're willing to go back and like complete these legacy arcs people like and bring back characters people like, and like Rebels came out and they had this whole Ahsoka Lives campaign where like Ahsoka finally got to come back and
Yeah,
like complete an arc as a character. And yeah, well, I can't wait to see it, especially in this Bad Batch, this really, really great animation style. It all looks great. The action looks so good. So, sure, we had to wait years and years for it, but in the end, it'll look better than it would have
yeah,
in the Clone Wars. So I'm looking forward to seeing it.
yeah.
I also wanted to, because they'll bring in Boba Fett, I'm sure, to get us a little bit hyped for
Book of Boba
Book
Fett.
of Boba Fett coming out at the
Yeah.
end of the year.
Yeah, I could just see Boba Fett being in the season finale of Bad Batch, and then they just have at the end Boba Fett will return in Book of Boba Fett.
Yeah, I didn't have much else done for it. I just kind of wrote
No.
down some notes of things that I liked, things that I thought about it. We're still got some mystery around Camino and what their sort of what that contingency plan is with Omega and what their further games are in here. I'm not a big fan of this show's version of Agent Callus, like the kind of Imperial commander
Oh,
guy.
Rampart, yeah. I just don't think we've
He's a
gotten
nothing
enough of him.
character, really.
He's just been in like 2 episodes, so I don't really like. They could easily have an episode where we see more of him and our opinions completely change. It's just right now he hasn't really done anything because he's barely been there.
Yeah, for me, he just comes off as like the really, really generic Imperial bad guy, which is disappointing because I think the bad guys in these animated shows have been some of the standout characters, whether it's Maul or whether it's
Yeah.
Cad Bane. So, or Agent Callus, even like that kind of a character in Rebels, I thought was probably the best character in Rebels. Honestly,
Yeah.
he had a really great arc. So I'm curious if they're going to do more with this guy, or if he's really just going to be like that background Imperial villain for the role they need him for.
Yeah.
And like you said, they're moving the release date over a bit, so I do wonder if this wasn't doing too well on Fridays or something like that, or if Loki was just such a hit on Wednesdays. They're like, oh, Wednesday's got to be the day.
Yeah. I preferred it more on Fridays. It was kind of like the kickoff to the weekend. Like when Book of Boba Fett starts on Wednesdays, like it's gonna suck having to get up early on fucking Wednesdays, but whatever. I do wish though that they would just premiere instead of premiering these shows at midnight or 3 a.m. depending on your time zone. I'd much rather they just release them like East Coast at 8 o'clock p.m. and West Coast at 5 o'clock p.m.
Yeah, it'll be nice
I
if
don't
they were
understand the
normal.
whole. I don't understand the whole point of like, hey, we're gonna release this at midnight.
Yeah, I think it's part of the streaming culture, or it's like you're not watching this like event TV thing, you're just watching like content that drops at midnight. You know, I think it would feel more like a unified cultural kind of experience if it dropped at like a semi-normal time where people could all kind of watch it together. Like Game of Thrones is kind of like that when it was on, like especially the final season or so. Like the whole world just kind of stopped for an hour and everybody watched it, and
Well,
that's something I miss about TV.
I'd even be okay if it was midnight East Coast time, like. But like 3 a.m. East Coast time, I'm like, fuck that. I'm not staying up for that when I gotta be up at 6:45 because I would just usually probably fall asleep at 10, set my alarm for midnight, take a little nap, wake up at midnight, watch the episode, and then fall back asleep.
Yeah, I'm stuck in that middle. At like, it doesn't drop until I think 3 a.m. here,
Yeah.
or 2 a.m. I think 2 a.m.
Yeah, if you're in Chicago, 2 a.m.
Yeah, it's 2 o'clock. Some nights I'm up and I just watch it, but otherwise I'll just wait. Depends on the show, you know.
Yeah.
Some of these shows I'm so into it that I know I won't sleep if I don't watch it, so I just stay up.
Yeah. And for me, I'm like, there's no way in hell I'm staying up until 3, so I just get up early for work. I'm not missing anything.
And now that we're halfway through the season of Bad Batch, do you got any overall thoughts now that we're mid-season?
Not really, except I'm cooling on the idea of the whole Camino Revolution being the season finale. I think that's more going to be a series finale thing because we have got like nothing on that since then. But granted, that could all change because they could do 2 or 3 episodes that focus on that and really build it up. But I think more that's like a series finale type situation.
Yeah, I'm thinking season 2, maybe season 3, like somewhere in the middle of the show, we'll probably get that. Yeah, not season 1 though, because we've gotten like it feels like the pacing is okay. One episode we check in with the Kaminoans in the main plot, then me couple fun filler episodes that have our dribbles of plot in there, but aren't like necessary episodes. Yeah. Then we get our episode here that definitely connects to the Kaminoan plot, and the Kaminoan plot feels like a long-term kind of plot, like you said. So they could run through it like 2 or 3 episodes could cover a lot of plot in this kind of a show, but I don't think it's gonna happen.
Especially if like the next 2 or 3 episodes, the Bad Batch meets Boba Fett, and we learn more about the clones in that aspect, while Omega is back on Camino, and we learn about the whole cloning aspect and everything going on Camino from her perspective. And then before we know it, it's like, oh yeah, they're definitely doing Camino Rise Against the Empire for the season 1 finale, but we'll see.
Yeah, Omega could be our eyes in the door, like you mentioned. I didn't think of it like that, but yeah, her kidnapping could be what we need to fill us in on what their master plan is, Camino.
All right,
another show where I got no real predictions. I feel like it's done a good job where like as soon as we think we know where it's going, like the next episode they do it. Like we were all like, oh, we know what they're doing. It's gonna be Captain Rex. That's the secret. And then next episode they're like, oh, we were ahead of you actually. We this is Rex. You knew and we knew.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts on Bad Batch, or should we move on to the movie of the week?
Yeah, no final thoughts on Bad Batch. I guess it's time to move on to our next segment, which is discussing Pixar's Luca.
Pixar's Luca. Pixar, I think it's their second movie to drop on Disney Plus after Soul, which I really, really like Soul a lot. So I was super looking forward to this one.
Yeah, I really enjoyed Soul. So yeah, I was interested in watching Luca, and then so I was like, oh, I'm going to surprise Tristan by watching Luca and being able to review Luca for our Disney Plus review. And then you messaged me saying, oh, yeah, I'm going to watch Luca for our review. And I'm like, well, I might as well tell him that's my plan, too.
I was looking forward to it. I got some Italian in me. I've been to Italy. I've seen the coast that looks a lot like what we see in Luca. And I was like, oh, cool. It would be nice to see a different kind of culture. We got Coco. That gave us like a view of the Mexican-Spanish culture.
Yeah.
And now we're going to get an Italian cuisine version of Pixar. But what are your thoughts on this one, Joe?
All right. So here are my general thoughts on it. I think...
Should we give like a bit of a plot before we go into our thoughts? Like the lightest of plots.
Yeah, simple plot. It's a Little Mermaid, but it's a boy instead of a girl. And instead of falling in love with the prince, he just makes a friend with a person that's also sea monster.
Could have been a gay movie. It would have been so much better.
It could have been. And yeah, they meet this girl whose like goal in life is to be to win this kind of race that's a triathlon that starts with swimming and then it goes to pasta eating, and then you got a bike race, because I think they thought that biking, swimming, and running was just too much athletic, and they wanted to throw something else in there, and they're like, well, we're in Italy, so we'll just swap out running with eating pasta, I guess. And then they meet Sebulba, and I can't ever remember that character's name, so I just thought of him as Sebulba every time I watched that movie. He's the villain of this movie. He's just like this older teenage, young 20s douchebag. Essentially, he's not really evil. He's just a prick. And then, every time these two kind of main characters touch water, they turn into like their sea monster form, and so they kind of have to avoid water the entire movie. And then towards the end, it's about accepting people that are different than you, and that is Luca. Did I miss anything?
I think he covered it. There's not much to cover.
Yeah, it's a very simple plot, very small scale for a movie. It takes place all in this little Italian village and kind of a timeless setting. It's one of those things where I got like a very much like a 1950s kind of 1960s kind of vibe where it's still like somewhat modern, but it's before much of technology. There was a radio. I remember that there was a radio on the back of a Vespa. So yeah, it'd be around like that time period. Um, my general thoughts were I thought visually it looked really good. Story I did not care about that much. Like you said, oh, if it had a gay storyline, it would have been better. I thought at least would have been like relatively interesting. There were so many parts of the movie. I'm so used to Pixar movies, the stories being like super original, and especially in the beginning, it felt very much like it borrowed from other stuff. Like there are definitely some Little Mermaid vibes of like the young boy in the beginning wanting to like see the land, see land, and he collected all of these little trinkets from land, and then you have this race that just completely reminded me of the Star Wars Episode 1 pod race, especially with the character that they said looked like a catfish, which was the inspiration for the look of Sebulba. And I was just like, oh, so this is just the pod race from Episode 1. And it was just like a lot of elements that didn't really feel original to me. The look of it, great. The story itself was fine. I think if it came out from any company that wasn't Disney, no one would even be talking about this movie at all, other than like, oh, it looks good.
Yeah, I'm in a similar boat. I thought it looked gorgeous, and uh, I have to imagine they based this island they went to off of the Trinquetere, which is a really popular travel destination in Italy, where there's these villages along the ocean, and they had those really colorful buildings on the side that I think are really iconic for Italy, and it captures that feeling really well, not just the look of it, but just like the beachy kind of tone of it, like these vibey towns you're just kind of hanging out, and it has that nostalgic kind of feel to it. So I liked the movie. I liked the feel and look of it. I thought the characters were fine enough for what the story was trying to tell. But unfortunately, I think the story is the biggest problem here. I think it's just very derivative. You mentioned a lot of the things that it's kind of similar to, but I felt that a lot. I'm fine with these animated kids movies feeling like their plots don't have to be magnificent, don't have to be like super groundbreaking or anything like that. But when you're seeing like, okay, the kid wants to go do this thing and the parent tells them they can't because they're overprotective, and the kid's gonna do it anyway and they're gonna learn a lesson, and it's like the whole first act of this movie, I just felt like, okay, I've seen this like so many times from the studio, and it just starts to feel like they're at this point where they're not necessarily putting their all into these storylines anymore, and they're like, oh, we can just make it Pixar, make it look good, and make it about family and heartfelt vibes or whatever, and people will like it. And I'm starting to get over it a little bit. This feels a bit easy. It feels a bit lazy to me, a little bit, I would say.
Yeah, like we were talking before, because our last show we did was the Star Wars, or not Star Wars, the movie villains, like the Hall of Fame, and I know Johnny's nomination for animation villain was Sid from Toy Story, and like to me, I don't even think Sid was the villain of that story. If you like look at the story itself, the villain of that story to me is Woody, and it's his kind of villain redemption arc is the focus of that story. And it was just like this wholly original story that I hadn't seen anything like that before. I mean, granted, it came out in 1995 when I was 2, but even like watching movies that came out before that or after that, it's not really a story I've seen like that ever. And this just felt like very derivative of other things I've seen. Like this almost felt like it was an idea for a Pixar short, and they didn't, which I think it could have made a really cool, fun, interesting, like 10-minute short film about the race. And then they realized that they didn't have a feature-length movie to come out this year, and they were just like, oh, we'll just extend the short out to like an hour 15.
I want to say this is the director's first feature film.
Yeah, and I was looking it up because I know he's done like a lot of stuff for Pixar before. It's like various, behind-the-scenes director type stuff. But I think this is kind of his first feature-length film. But either way, it's like someone at Pixar should have been like, yeah, you need to like put some kind of originality like into this story. I saw someone on because every time I watch like a relatively recent movie, I always look at the official discussion thread on Reddit, and someone said this movie would have been a whole lot better if it focused on the other boy, and like his whole thing about his dad abandoning him, and then like learning to be accepted as a sea monster, and then his friend, when it's finally revealed he's a sea monster, his friend betrays him, and then he's been going on these fishing trips uh with this like girl's dad, and then this girl's dad is like that we know what happens because they reference it, and he's out like helping him fish, but we don't see it except for the first time when both boys are there, but then afterwards it's just him, and with him like giving him fatherly advice, and then finally his friend goes away, and he decides to stay with like essentially this new dad. And I feel like that would have been a different original kind of story. You know, you could have kept all the same animation, and I think overall it just would have been 100 times better of a movie.
Yeah, I just think this doesn't feel quite polished. I don't want to harp on it the whole time we're doing it, but like,
Yeah.
yeah, the story just doesn't feel like it's quite all there. And I looked up the director, and this is his first feature-length film. He was put on the map for doing. Well, he's worked behind the scenes of Pixar all the time, but I think what got him this spot was that he did La Luna, a short film for Pixar that was the opening short for Brave. So I think you can tell that his experiences in short film, and he had a good core concept here of like the visuals of the fish, the sea monster when he's in the water, when he's in the air, he's a human, and they have to figure out how to get along, and they have to figure out that just because you're different doesn't mean you're worse, and we can all be. It has feels like a good core story concept, but it's not fleshed out enough to make it a feature length film. I think the villain's a big problem too. Like you mentioned, the villain is kind of like this douchey Vespa driver guy, and I think there's been so many really iconic, memorable Pixar villains. Like you said, Johnny tried to put one on our Hall of Fame. They were so good, and I think you think about characters like even Lotso from Toy Story 3. You remember him, and I think
the Spectre or the Prospector from Toy Story 2 is even
the Prospector. Yeah, I think a lot of Pixar has
Kevin Spacey's Grasshopper, like.
Yeah, Pixar has created iconic villains, and I think they didn't put the work in on this one, and unfortunately it shows. And it was an enjoyable watch. I'm glad I watched it, but it's easily going to be something like Good Dinosaur, where it becomes like a forgotten Pixar movie that nobody really talks about.
Yeah, I would have loved like when they showed that there was like fish monsters that have been like secretly living in this village the whole time with like those two women. I would have loved if like the villain was revealed at the end to also be a sea monster hiding in plain sight that was like had somehow figured out that the two boys were sea monsters and was trying to get rid of them because he was like, well, if they figure them out, that they figure me out. And like that was like a big ending kind of reveal. Just something that was more interesting than this guy's fucking a douche.
I 100% thought it was. I mean, I didn't think it was gonna be a gay movie, but I was getting some like queer baiting vibes from the characters, and I was like, oh, that'll be interesting if Pixar had like the first out gay characters in their movie, and it was like, oh, you could be different and still be okay. And but I, it's a little too gutsy for Disney, I guess.
Yeah.
I liked it overall, though. I mean, it was fine, but it's not something memorable for me.
Yeah.
And I like the visuals. I think if you're going to sit back and I had my lights on, my reactive lights, so it looked kind of cool, and it was nice to just sit back and look at it and get that beachy kind of summer vibe for it. So if you're looking for something to get you warmed up, feel like you're laying out in the sun, it's a nice kind of sun vibe movie, but not something that I'd really recommend for anybody outside of like the niche of people who like these.
Yeah.
What do you do today?
Not much.
Alright, so
Joe's muted right now, so I'm going to tell you guys about how much when I went to Italy, it was a lot like this though. You got these kind of vibey beach towns like that, and I think they definitely based as off Tricateria. I was looking back to my photos trying to see if I had any old photos from the trip, but I do not.
All right, I'm back.
I can't tell if Joe is talking or not because I've muted his mic on Streamlabs, but I'll mute him right now. How you doing, Joe?
I'm good. Just a second. All right, I'm good. So they're doing drywall work in my house today, so they were just asking if it's all right. But yeah, so oh well, we're good now.
Yeah, I was telling the audience about how when I went on a trip to Italy, they captured that kind of feeling really well of these small towns, and that's something that I liked a lot about this, is that it just captured this timeless kind of classical era. Like you said, there's not like modern technology, there's no cell phones being pulled up, but there's nothing to super date it. to any specific moment in time. So it has that
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah, it's
timeless
very.
charm of wandering into this beachy city, and I like that about it.
Yeah, I know I was harping on this movie, but I would say strategically for timelessness of a movie, I think that's far and away the better way to go. Like, obviously, like I said, there was the radio, which is a quick reference, but I think trying to make, especially an animated movie, modern with how much technology changes rapidly is always gonna. I think it's gonna date a movie very quickly. Like, I know we've talked about Chef before with Twitter and everything, and even like the look of Twitter has changed so much that when you watch this movie, you're like, oh, that definitely came out in like 2014, just based on like the look of Twitter and the everything about Twitter. And I feel like you're better off just trying to go for a more timeless feel. There may be a point where technology gets to such a degree that it kind of stagnates and stops, but I think especially right now, trying to put much technology into your movie is always going to date it. So I think, yeah, going for that timeless 50s to 80s kind of feel. They could tell me, oh yeah, this movie takes place in 1981 or it takes place in 1959, and I'd believe it either way.
Yeah, overall it was okay, like we said, but unfortunately, especially compared to Soul, which I thought was really creative and innovative, and it was not necessarily something I've seen in Pixar before. Like, it had a lot of the emotional beats that Pixar uses, but I think the premise was really interesting and unique. And I think it took a premise that's not that unique and it did something not that unique with it. Like, it didn't even use the premise in a groundbreaking, even slightly interesting way. So yeah, I would almost call this my least favorite Pixar movie. Although I haven't seen Cars 3, so that one could be worse.
Yeah, I haven't seen Cars 2 or 3. I haven't seen A Good Dinosaur, so I can't really say that. And some of them, like A Bug's Life, I haven't watched in so long, but I know a lot of people talk crap on that one, so I can't say anything. But is this going to be in my rotation of movies that I watch? No. Like, I'm definitely, if you gave me, like, okay, you have to watch a Pixar movie right now, I'm going to pick all 3 Toy Stories before that. I'm going to pick Monsters, Inc. before that, I'd even be like, I haven't watched A Bug's Life in a long time. I'm gonna check that out before I'd watch this again. Granted, I watched it essentially for the first time this morning, so it's kind of, because it's like I just watched it. That's also gonna knock it down on my list of wanting to rewatch. But yeah, if you gave me Raya and the Last Dragon, I just watched not like last week, and I'd throw that on before this for sure. I'm almost at the point now where I feel like, at least as far as current movies, that Disney Animation has surpassed Pixar. Because you look at Disney Animation's recent movies, you have like Frozen, which I didn't watch Frozen 2, but Frozen 1 is pretty good. Tangled is up there. I really like Raya and the Last Dragon. I really like Moana. And then you have Coco as well. And then what's Pixar put out in that time period? Nothing like great. What Toy Story 4, which I would have liked better if they had just called it Woody, because I feel like it goes against a lot of the themes and messages of Toy Story. Like, hey, yeah, do it all for the kid. The kids are the most important. Like, even if you're a toy, it doesn't matter. Toy Story 4, fuck kids. I'm a toy. I'm going to do what I want.
Yeah, and I look at the upcoming list of Pixar movies too, and there's not a lot that entices me. Like, they're doing a Buzz Lightyear prequel kind of space adventure movie thing.
Basically a space adventure movie, and they're basically like, okay, this is about the real Buzz Lightyear that the toy and I guess show were based off of. Speaking of which, why is Buzz Lightyear Star Command not on Disney Plus?
Oh, I watched that a lot when I was a kid. That'd be a fun nostalgia watch. I want to give you a correction.
Disney has to own it. Like, why is it not on Disney Plus?
Before we get a bunch of haters in the comments correcting us live, I'll tell you that Coco was a Pixar movie.
Oh wait, Coco was Pixar. It's just like, to me, it doesn't feel like a Pixar movie. Just it feels more like Disney Animation, just because a lot of the Pixar movies, like, people make that meme of like, what if bugs had feelings? What if toys had feelings? What if cars had feelings? What if monsters had feelings? Where Coco, like, obviously they go to like the Day of the Dead realm and like there's the skeletons, but for the most part, to me, Coco feels more like a Disney Animation movie, I guess I would. It feels more like a Frozen and a Raya and the Last Dragon and a Tangled and that than a Monsters Inc. or a Finding Nemo or a Toy Story.
Yeah, and they've had a couple misses since then. I thought Incredibles 2 was all right, but not as
good.
A huge step down from the first one for me. I thought Toy Story 4 was fine, but not necessary, and didn't really add a lot to the franchise. Onward was alright.
Yeah, Onward was fine. I felt like Onward was Onward was a very basic story, but they're like, oh, it's not basic because they're elves, and I'm like, okay, whatever.
And Soul, I thought was a really great one. I was hoping it'd be a return to form and kind of like a beginning of greatness once again for Pixar, but unfortunately, Luca feels like a step backward. It's a lot like Onward, I guess, where it's like a very traditional story told in a slightly non-traditional way.
Soul felt like an animated movie made for adults. Like I remember midway through this where I'm like, I can't imagine my like 7-year-old niece and nephews enjoying this movie about a 40-year-old guy playing jazz.
And comparatively, when I watched Luca, I did feel like I think my niece would be into this. Like, this is something that I think is much more made for kids. It feels like Pixar's back on this train of like, okay, one for us, one for you kind of thing, where Soul was one for them. It was a kind of like a word contending, like really groundbreaking movie that was different from anything else. And then Luca was like, okay, sell the tickets to the kids kind of movie. I'm looking forward to it. The other next movie is called Turning Red. I don't think there's much out about it right now. It's March 11th, 2022. Directed by Dami Shi.
Oh, so is it going to be like a dragon? They're like Turning Red before he even gave like a director's name. Like for whatever reason, I was envisioning like a dragon. Maybe it's just because I've been talking about Raya and the Last Dragon. But then the director's name sounded Asian. So like I'd be down for like a Pixar Asian inspired dragon movie.
According to the synopsis, it's called A Young Girl's Devotion to a Boy Band Who Uncontrollably... Okay, what? I gotta read that again. That's a weird premise. A young girl's devotion to a boy band who uncontrollably poofs into a giant red panda.
Oh, okay. So I was close. It's Asian inspired, but just a panda, not a dragon.
I read it. I think I read it backwards because I guess the girl turns into the uncontrollable red panda. I thought the boy band turned into the panda. I was like, oh, interesting. But I like it's a unique premise. I'm looking forward to that. Honestly, I think that's a unique, modern thing. Like
that was our problem. That was my problem. I mean, granted, you could say, oh, boy, a sea monster like enters a triathlon, or like two sea monsters enter a triathlon. It'd be like, oh, that's an original story I've never seen before, and I'd be wrong. But you, like that to me sounds like more an original thing that doesn't sound derivative of other things. But I could watch it and be like, oh, this is literally School of Rock, but one of them is a red panda.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's another one where it's a short film director who's doing her first feature film, so it'll be interesting to see how she does it. She recently did the one called Bao, I believe. It was about the little dumpling.
That was cool. Yeah, I like Bao. That was like sad. And I saw people say this movie Luca was like a sad tearjerker, and like at no point was I like the only point where I was like semi-sad was when Luca basically betrayed his friend and like outed him as a sea monster and then like ran away. That was the only part where I was like, oh, that kind of sucks. But like there's movies where I'll like tear up. At no point during that movie was I even like remotely close to being like, oh my god, I'm so sad.
Yeah,
like there was a moment.
Usually does get to me like that, and this didn't necessarily do that for me either.
There was a moment in the last episode of Superman and Lois where I legit like teared up. And you need to catch up on the show so I can fucking talk about that show with somebody.
I'll catch up on it. I just, too much Disney Plus to watch,
I will say,
gotta watch Loki 3 times.
So our Disney Plus review next week is canceled. We are doing a Superman and Lois retrospective, where we talk about all the episodes that have been released. So you gotta step on it.
Yeah, go ahead and binge it instead of watching Loki. I got this,
Yeah. That moment though. They also
I can hear him.
Yeah, they
knocking on the wall.
Yeah, so they're fixing ceiling in one of our rooms from when the tree caved in. But yeah, there was a moment that they also explained something that's always bothered me in Superman lore. But
hey, maybe next week we'll talk about that. If I catch up in time, we can do a little segment on Joe rants about Superman and Lois.
And how good it is, and how if you're not watching this show, what the fuck are you doing?
Next week, I don't think we have a movie to cover. It might be our first Disney Plus week without a movie. We did Cruella our first week, and we have Luca this week. I don't think anything drops next week.
No, I thought about binging that John Stamos coach show, but nah, fuck it. I don't care.
You don't
about,
have.
I don't care.
You're not gonna
about
torture yourself.
it. It looks too much like the Mighty Ducks Game Changers, and like I already have one show about kid sports in my life, so.
Next week, though, I want to do a quick review of Monsters Inc. because I'm going to be rewatching Monsters Inc. and also Monsters University leading up to Monsters at Work. So I think my plan is for next week, I'll be doing a quick take on Monsters Inc. I haven't seen it since it came out, probably. And then I'll be doing Monsters University. I haven't seen that since it came out in theaters for sure.
All right.
So I'll be doing a quick take on those two over the next 2 weeks.
All right. And do you have anything else to say about our Disney Plus review?
No, it was a good one. Unfortunately, Luca didn't quite live up to my expectations of it, but it was fun to watch it, and I'm looking forward to what Disney Plus can drop on us next.
Yeah, same. I'm looking forward to. I'll probably watch Black Widow in the theater, but when that goes to Disney Premiere, I think we'll review that as well. I will say Monday, 7 o'clock. Tristan, Bobby, myself, and whoever wants to play along with us will be playing Jackbox games. All audience members, as long as they're not pieces of shit, are free to play with us. And then we'll be back for our Disney Plus review next week. And I think all of our main shows, whether we're doing a Hall of Fame that week, a regular show, a Mount Rushmore, whatever, will be debuting 7 o'clock on YouTube. On Friday nights. We want to have at least somewhat of that consistent time for YouTube and our podcast forms because our Twitch keeps jumping around. We're hoping that maybe any kind of set schedule will help our audience grow, and kind of this whole sporadic schedule might be partially what's hindering us from growing. So if we can always be like, hey, Friday at 7, that's when our shows debut on YouTube, maybe we can help grow that consistent audience. So that's all I have to say. Trying to get out of here before the pounding continues, but I think the pounding's going to continue all day. Pound, 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 pound. I'm sure you can hear it on the mic.
Yeah, you got your ungodly mischief out there, Joe.
Any final thoughts, Tristan? Or are you good?
No, it was a fun one. Let's have Joe lose this week.
We're not competing this week. It's just.
Oh, that's right. We're not competing.
It's just Jackbox, so I'll probably lose some of the games. But yeah, I will say next week. Not this upcoming week, but next week is Bobby and I in the realm of forgotten movies. I have yet to start any of my pitches. I would have done it, but then we were doing Jackbox this week, and I'm like, I'll just wait. I don't care. I got time. All right.
See you guys.
Have a nice day.